Welcome back to this special live edition of NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman. Let's get back to the questions. And again, we invite you to give us a call at 1-888-824-6688 with your question. But first, Kurt, I've got a question for you. As we think about the options available to bale hay and to actually cut hay, we were talking about this during the break, cut hay while it's being baled. Tell folks a few of the New Holland options as it relates to that.
Sure. Really, we have two. We have bale slice and we have crop cutter. And crop cutter is a rotary cutter. Let's talk about bale slice a little bit. Bale slice basically is sickle sections inside the bale chamber that are in the starter roll. So they stick themselves out. The bale will actually roll against those sickle sections and cut grooves into the bale, about 6 inches apart. The key difference is that the core is solid, and you can pull those knives out with the control box and leave yourself a 2, 4, 6, or 8-inch uncut skin if you choose to wrap with twine.
Okay.
You can cut all the way to the periphery if you want to use net. So that's kind of in a gist what bale slice is. It will cost you less money than what crop cutter will be. Crop cutter is going to have 15 knives, 2.6-inch centers. So you can take every other one out, cut 5-inch lengths of cut if you want to, or put a custom pattern in there, whatever you choose to do. The knives are spring-loaded to protect them against stone ingestion. And that bale is cut basically from the very beginning all the way to the edge if you choose to have it that way. You control that with the remotes of the tractor. You'll pull it out whenever you want it out, put it in whenever you want it in. So those are some of the key differences. Another difference with crop cutter is that there's a floor that hydraulically will swing down should you get a rock that goes in there that stalls the rotor. You can actually drop the floor down, spit the rock out underneath, or let's say you had to rebale a bale. Maybe somebody got too quick on the draw on the remote. The baler didn't wrap it off with net. You can unroll your bale, pull the net out from underneath the bale, throw it in the tractor cab floor, come back around and start baling that. And maybe you got a little aggressive at pulling it in, you stall the rotor. No big deal. Drop your floor down. You dub the space between the rotor and the rotor floor. Allow that plug to come into the baler itself, all from the comfort and convenience of the cab.
So tell us, step back a minute, and why should producers even consider processing hay as they're baling it?
Sure. Some of the differences would be an uncut bale would weigh 15% less than a cut bale. Okay. So if you're looking at ways to cut down your wrapping costs, maybe some freight costs, maybe you have a limited storage area inside buildings and you want your primest crop in there. If you cut that primer crop, you can get up to 15% more in each bale.
Wow.
And then some other aspects, maybe you grind hay today. If you actually cut it with bale slice or rotary cut, you could eliminate that operation. Yeah. And actually, if you're using a TMR mixer, they break apart nicely, quickly, less wear on the mixer. You also get a more uniform mix by having the baler do the cutting versus, say, a mixer. Hay would have a tendency to float around in the mix, whereas you're dealing with a smaller amount of material when you're cutting with a baler, so you get a more precise cut.
Yeah, I was thinking that myself. I mean, we currently bale it in big squares, and then we have a grinder come in and actually grind hay that we mix into our total mix ration. And what you're telling me is that if we had one of these round balers, really we could, eliminate that cost and that expense of having somebody come in and grind hay.
You bet.
Yeah. We had an email question come to us earlier today. Ryan from Tennessee said, I noticed that my dealer has lots of types of net wrap. How do I know which is best?
Well, that's kind of an opinion thing. There's a lot of widths out there and also different types of net. You predominantly have net widths that are the width of the chamber of the baler. And there are also widths that are over width, like say 63-inch net for say a 5-foot wide bale. And you'd run that net in a New Holland baler because we have notches in the side sheets that allow that net to get tucked over the edges.
Okay.
So you can use just standard old netting that's a little bit wide and get over the edge protection when you're putting them end to end for storage. There's also some other net products out there where we double weave the net pattern in the center. That's an awesome product for corn stalks, biomass crops like switchgrass, where you need a little bit more strength in the center. Instead of wrapping with 4, maybe even 5 wraps of net, you can cut that back to 3, 3 1/4, 3 1/2 by using that new style net.
Outstanding. And while we're talking about that, what recommendations do you have in terms of how we stack round bales? I see lots of different thoughts and processes, especially outside.
You bet. One of the best ways that you can stack hay is first pick a well-drained site.
Sure.
Ideally, if you had a gravel lot, that would be ideal. But if you stack bales on the bottom and put bales in the creases and go 3 high, take a tarp and create basically a teepee over it, spike the tarp into the ground, that has almost as good a protection as what a building would have. It's pretty close for a lot less money.
Yeah, I'd say. Another email question. This comes to us from Kansas, and I don't know, you may have a little bit of perspective, Jordan. It says he has a 1411 disc bind, and he has trouble making left-hand turns as he's transporting that piece of equipment. What is he talking about there?
Well, what he's talking about is the 1411 has a very innovative tongue design where it's actually curved slightly.
Okay.
That curved tongue is really intended to give really good maneuverability when you're in the field, so you can make 90-degree turns very, very easily. It has the downside, unfortunately, when you're in transport, it can limit your ability to turn to the left.
Okay.
One of the things we've actually changed on those with the H7000 is the introduction of our drawbar or three-point mounted type swivel hitches. And there's a lot of advantages to that swivel hitch. The swivel hitch itself actually clamps firm to the drawbar pin so that it's no longer pivoting around the drawbar pin. It actually moves that pivoting point back about 2.5 feet and pivots at a swivel type gearbox.
Gotcha.
So because of that, it actually allows the tractor to turn very well both to the right and to the left. Another major advantage of that is that the PTO stays straight to the back of the tractor at all times, whereas with a CV type joint on a 1411, it's always swinging. There's virtually no movement left or right, so the wear on the PTO shaft is very, very minimal. And it eliminates the need for that CV type joint, which is generally a high maintenance item, and they can be pretty expensive. And if you hit the lift arm off of that shaft, it's pretty expensive too.
Pretty pricey repair.
That is one other big advantage I like to point out to folks. If they've ever done that with a swivel type hitch, you don't have to worry about hitting your drawbar or your lift arm into your PTO shaft anymore.
Great perspective. And we go now to one of our callers. Sounds like Jeff is calling us from right here in Colorado. Jeff, thanks for calling.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm a big fan, Kevin, sorry, this is Jeff. I'm a big fan of the show, and wanted to ask a question. I've heard a lot about Tier 4 engines, and I want to know really what's the difference between that and what I've got now. And really, I guess what I'm asking is the Tier 4 engine worth the extra money?
What do you think?
Well, the Tier 4 engines are required by manufacturers because of new emissions laws, and there's several different Tier 4 solutions. New Holland is recognized as a clean energy leader from Fiat Powertrain in taking that technology and applying that in our tractors. For over 100 horsepower tractors, we're using SCR, or selective catalytic reduction, through the addition of diesel exhaust fluid. Overall, the tractors today are providing less emissions into the air than what tractors were at a lower tier level. So it's continued with that way. We're also seeing some increases in fuel efficiency as they're advancing as well compared to the prior series tractors. So it's a mandate by all manufacturers to be able to comply with those emission standards. And there is a difference between the manufacturers in terms of the solutions. And taking a look at that, part of that solution is also determined by the application or the cycle that it's required, whether it's running at a higher engine RPM, providing tillage versus more of a lower RPM for utilities or chores type applications. But bottom line is all of the tractors today being produced and sold here in the United States are Tier 4 compliant.
Very good. Good clarification. Kurt, I want to go back to you. There seems to be a trend towards more high moisture bales. And I guess two questions. Number one, what's the moisture content you recommend if you're going to bale, high moisture forage? And secondly, what are some of the benefits you see in high moisture hay bales?
Well, moistures can vary anywhere from, wet hay at 25% all the way up to standing crop at, 70, 75%. Ideally, in the 40 to 60 range is going to make some of your better quality feed. You are relying on the plastic wrap very heavily if you're underneath 50% moisture to that 25% moisture to create an anaerobic condition for that crop to ferment in its limited capabilities. Above 50 up to 75 or 72-ish, you're going to have both anaerobic fermentation as well as the anaerobic environment. And the anaerobic fermentation will create some acids so that it kind of pickles or preserves the crop. So the key there, though, to remember is that use at least 1 mil thick plastic, and you want 6 wraps per linear foot on that bale to give good protection, especially if you're going to keep it over a year. If you open one of those bales up, and let's say it's 9 months later, and you get a little bit of white molding on the outside, that's a sign that either the plastic was on the cheap side, maybe it wasn't quite 1 mil, or maybe you should take a look at doing maybe 7 wraps per foot or 8 wraps per foot, because maybe you're in a warmer climate like Florida in the southern United States, and typically they'll get more UV breakdown of that plastic and need a little bit tighter seal. So those are some of the things you can take a look at.
What do producers tell you about what they like about putting up high moisture hay like that?
What's awesome about high moisture hay is that, you know, cut it one day, bale it the next.
Yeah.
Less weather risk. Another cool thing is that you're gathering up more of that crop. You're getting more dry matter tons off of that field because you're getting less shatter of both stems and leaves. So you're doing a better job with what you're given, and cattle love that stuff. I mean, it's very digestible.
Great palatability.
You bet. Yep.
Very good. Again, great insight and some very, very practical tips. So thank you, guys. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association is so happy to have New Holland as a partner. And if you join our organization now, you'll get a free New Holland Haymakers Handbook. So join NCBA today. Give us a call at 1-866-USA-BEEF.